Hello, my name's Nigel Griffiths. I work in a big corporation, and I recently came across this presentation I first gave in 2008 about presentations and how to improve them. In big corporations, we have this little term, don't we? Presentation from hell. And I wanted to up my game, and I came across two important books that made me radically rethink the way I do my presentations, and I hope to pass those thoughts and ideas on to you now. Now, what are these two charming young ladies doing in these pictures? We have one that's reading and we have one that's listening. Now, unfortunately, people can't read and listen at the same time. They'll claim they are, but they're doing one or the other, and your visual way of finding information takes over, and you will be reading things and you'll be tuning out what the person's saying. So what do we want our audience in a presentation to actually do? We do not want them to read what's on the slide, because then they're not listening to what we are saying, and we can't make personal communication with them unless they're listening to what we say and looking at us now and again. We also have, in big corporations, it's still going on now, this essay on a foil. We know it's absolute madness. So how do we get out of this problem? It's very simple. Suddenly dawned on me one day, you cut and paste that essay into the speaker notes. It's good content, and you could share this presentation with somebody else and they could read all those speaker notes. But we don't want them up on the screen, because if somebody starts reading them, they're not listening. So what we do want is to simplify that core message. Typically we want 1 or 3 points on a slide. This one's actually got 5, just to stretch the point a little bit. So I developed these logos or images for the 5 important things I wanted to get over in the presentation. And it's very interesting and stimulating to get down what is the actual point of this slide. And this actually liberates the speaker, because I could cover those 5 things in 5 to 10 seconds if I really wanted to, or a shorter time. And also I could then go and give them more background information, or concentrate on the one that applies particularly to my audience. It actually frees you up as a speaker, and now your slide is backing up what you're talking about. So here's the original slide here, blah, 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 blah. What are the 5 points? Well, you might say the bits in blue perhaps, but then I've forgotten what they were. And here's my big slide with those 5 important points I wanted to get over. Next thing, make it personal. They've come to listen to you, so put your picture on the front of the presentation, particularly if you're at conferences, so that if they get to recognize your face and they see that you're speaking on another session, then they'll say, I like that guy, I'll go and watch him again. And I jokingly put up in here, unless the slides were developed by a particularly ugly committee, don't put the picture on the slide. If I'm in a room talking to my colleagues and I put this picture up, they'll ask me usually, Nigel, who is that picture of? I don't recognise them. Yes, that's me about 20 years ago. Humour is quite a good idea. Now we have lots of slides. We could have 200 slides if we really wanted to, if they were just 1 point per slide. And really want to reduce these big slides with lots and lots of points. Yes, really 1 point per slide. Maybe a group of 3 things if there's actually 1 point and 3 sub-points you actually need to get over. Also note that a picture is worth 1,000 words, famous saying, right? So rather than saying a butterfly is a thing that flaps around, it's coloured and there's a mirror image of each other. So we don't have to explain everything in words, just give them a diagram, a picture, a photograph, and they'll get all that in a split second. Also note in here we got bullet points. Let's remove those bullet points. Did it make any difference? None whatsoever. Bullet points are practically pointless. So let's skip those. Let's get rid of all the words. We've just got a picture. That's much better. Let's make the picture bigger. But if I presented slides like this, my daughter would look over my shoulder and say, no corners or edges, Dad. So I'm absolutely banned from doing this. And what I now do is show them the picture. No horrible corners or frame around the picture. This is what I want you to get. Your eyes will immediately look at the central part, the butterfly, and I can talk about butterflies, and you say, oh yes, Nigel's so right. Another one is, if you've got a complex diagram, often have that in computers, and lots of different things, arrows and things pointing out particular features, don't show them the whole slide. What we need to do is tell them a story. Come back to that in a minute. So we put up, this is the file systems and the processes, and then here's the containers, and then here how the file systems are mounted, and then we put in the network on top of it. Now they understand that. You've told them a story, they've followed with you and they've built up this picture, and they can see what's going on. And they've listened to what you're saying. Next, I noticed that a lot of corporations suffer with this sort of thing. We have this company template that people feel they have a duty to stick with it. And then I added up the amount of space this is actually occupying. It was about 25% of the screen couldn't be used because of these stripes at the top and bottom or whatever the latest fad is. And I decided, no, that's my screen space, not my company's. I'm going to get rid of it. And in fact, if the audience have forgotten which company you're from or the subject of the actual talk while you're in the middle of it, then you've lost the audience completely. The best thing you can do is close your laptop and walk out. At least I'll remember something about your session. So you'll notice these slides, I just got the little thing at the top in the corner if I really have to put the copyright message or something on that. Also at the top in here it says no distractions like this one, because people read that and not actually see what the rest of the slide is about. Next big one, everybody hates this, but it is true. Point size 20 is actually too small. You should always be above that. No more than 20 words, otherwise you've not got 1 point, you've got several points, and they'll all get mixed up and nobody learn anything. And rarely use those bullet points. Oops, I deliberately did a bad slide in here. Do use a few large words, because then they get the point of the slide, and the rest of the slide should be backing you up like a happy and sad face. Next one is on these presentations with graphs. This is actually the same data done 4 different ways with Excel, which are graphics from hell. Let's face it, they're boring. And can you see what the main point of these, any one of these slides actually, they're all pretty bad. Now I'm going to show you what is recommended in the Presentations End book. Right, now, do you get the main point? The main point here is that in 2007 we had the biggest number, right? You didn't see that in the previous slides. That is what the message you're trying to get over. And then he said, well, what's all this eye candy in the corner? Well, the young lady here is looking at the one. She will push you towards the red block, and red is a very distinctive colour. So your eye immediately goes to what you're trying to get over on this slide. Now, in the Presentations End, it talks a lot about simplicity, design, and beauty. If the image on the screen looks right, then you're much more willing to believe what it's actually trying to tell you. It just feels good when you learn the new information. The less things on the slide, the clearer the message that people are going to take away from it. So Zen principles, and each of these are chapters in the book, so do go and read the book, is have design in the layout of your slides and not just function. It's not just there to get over the 400 words of information that must be imparted. Story will come back to look at that, but not just argument. You're not going to have this is good and that is bad. People want to know, why is that good? What's your experience that tells you that that is good? Why is that good for me as well? That's what they actually want. Symphony is how does all the presentation fit together? Are you going through a series of things that make sense? Then you want empathy. You want to encourage your audience to agree with what you're trying to get over, not just logic. And they've got to feel that it's the right thing. And play. This is not only just serious. I find a lot of people are very serious at work and giving presentations. And it's good to have some humour in there, a play in there, maybe a little joke deliberately added there to loosen up the conversation. And we need to remember that. That aids learning. And then we want meaning. Why are we trying to get these things over to the audience? How does that add to their life? Not just an accumulation of facts that they can just ignore the next day. So the slides, repeating a little bit here, are a visual enhancements for your spoken ideas. And the audience wants a story about your experience. That's how they're going to learn. So remember, the slides are not really the vehicle for getting over the information. Second book was Made to Stick. Fantastic book. This is talking about ideas that really stick in people's minds. These are ideas that you might have learned at work, and you'll go home and tell your partner or your kids about it. You want to share this with other people in the office the following day. This is a really good thing here. And the easiest way of doing that is telling them a story. Come back to that in a second. So we want to make the stories simple. Don't add facts and features that are irrelevant to what you're trying to get into their minds. It's got to have something unexpected. The story of I went to the local shop, bought a newspaper, doesn't interest anybody. But if you said I went to the local shop and I nearly lost my leg, then they're suddenly hooked in. They want to say, what happened? What's the end of the story? How can I learn from this? It's got to be something concrete, something that's actually useful in the long term, a proper subject rather than something trivial. And you've got to have credibility. You need to put some little bit of facts in here that people will then believe that this actually happened to you and what you're saying is credible and meaningful. You're not just making it all up. You need to get in there emotional content, how you feel about this, how this makes you excited, how this makes you happy. And then they'll absorb that as well. And the best way of doing that, because humans are built to listen and learn from stories. Now, a few words on actual presenting. I'm assuming that you've done some of this already, so there's some little points in here. Now, presentations are very much like TV documentaries. Now, I want you to go home tonight and watch a documentary and watch what they're actually doing on the screen. What is the verbal content and what is the screen content? And you'll find that they are all verbal stories enhanced by imagery and pictures. And of course, when they do a TV documentary, they use a lot of time and skill to get their message over in the most effective way and with emotional content. And sometimes, though, you realise this documentary didn't have enough content and these pictures are not really important at all. They're just filling up some space to make it last the mandatory 45 minutes or whatever. Slides then are an extension of what you say. Now you can see this guy in here hasn't got a slide behind him. You have the ability to switch off the projector or just have a slide with nothing on it. And suddenly everybody in the room is looking at you and listening to what you say next. Very useful tool to get the main message over. And then you can carry on. And make it personal. You got to make eye contact with everybody you can in the room. Smile a lot. Before I give a presentation or before I even record a YouTube video, I smile to myself because that just somehow comes over in your voice. And get near them. The front row can't go to sleep if you're there and you can go kick them and get them awake again. They won't dare do that. Now here's two people. What are they doing? Well, if you look at the context around them, they're obviously in, I think, a early school, and they're living a story that they're telling to their probably children in here. And by moving around, you're conveying emotional involvement in the story. When you're actually giving a presentation, be very focused on your audience, pick up what's going on in the room, but you still got to behave naturally and flexible. Even if you're nervous, you've got to look in control. Hard to do. Eventually you get the hang of that. And be passionate, engage. If somebody comes up with an idea, don't shoot it down immediately. Say, that's interesting, we'll have to take it offline if it's too long or complicated an issue to deal with. But you've got to appeal to both their logic, A equals B, and emotional. You want this really, don't you? Now, before we go, I want to tell you a little story about the scariest presentation I've given in my career. I was invited to give a talk on a particular topic of a particular product that's new and had just come out. I've been using it for about 2 months. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll give a talk about that. Then it turned out that they said the people in the room, or some of them, would be the actual people that develop the product. So there's the architects, designers, programmers, testers, documentation people, and the project managers of this product. And the rest of the people in the room were the top 200 or so of my peers from around the world. So no pressure, right? And I decided I can't give a talk about this product because I'm not the expert in the room. People know a lot more than I do about it. But what I could give them a talk about was my experience of taking a copy of this product and getting it working, and what I found was easy, what I found was hard, and where some improvements could be made. So I started giving this talk, and a little of the way in, I wanted to give them a little story. This is about 1/3 of the audience. I'm going to give them a story, another story inside a story. So this is the story of when my wife and I take our kids to my parents' house. My mother prepares what I call sort of fancy food with little bits of salad and salad dressing and pine nuts and lots of little bits and pieces on top that I can't even recognise. And my kids would say, they're only about 5 and 7 at the time, they look at this and say, yuck, I'm not eating that. Didn't go down very well. So over the summer, we slowly persuaded our children to say, no thank you, that's not my particular favourite. So on the next visit to my parents, the kids used their special coded phrase, and my parents thought they were very well behaved children, and we all knew the secret code that was really going on. So for the rest of the presentation, when I came across a subject or part of the product that I found was not very good, I'd say, this part of the product is not my particular favourite. Went down a lot better than saying this part of the product is useless, or much stronger words than that. So that really got the audience going on my side. This is me actually answering some questions at the end. This is me getting stuck with a question and somebody from the audience could actually answer it. And here's the guy that was running the 5-day course, and thank you very much for my talk. So here are the 2 books that made this big change with me. We have Presentations Zen by Garr Reynolds. In there's many examples of a before image, like your typical corporation might put forward, and then his alternative to actually get the real message across. Many of them are real eye-openers, and you can see the bad before images, and you can say, I saw a bunch of those last week. He also has a book on design. I think it's Design Zen. That's worth reading too. The second book is Made to Stick. This is getting your idea stuck in the mind of somebody else. Lots of interesting stories that they tell, and some of those I can still remember 15 years later. Also, we know probably that you've come across TED, lots of inspirational speakers. This time though, go and watch some of those people and see what they're talking about and what is actually on the slides behind them. I'm wondering how many of you noticed that that top blue right-hand triangle disappeared over 10 minutes ago. It's just a little distraction. We can do without it. If you like this and you learned something, give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to be told when my next video goes out.